and welcome to today's tutorial. During tutorials, I show the best way that you can run starting points, trouble techniques, and now, because right now I'm just gonna basic face and the hair, and sort of simplistic. What should be a program. They add video pane, then you should have airbrush, just so it doesn't that gets a little too dense. Hard shadow brush, so it's just I just turned the brush pen for. It's basically all you need. We're just on the color drop. We're here on my color to the right, just so that way the color a bit darker. It's the red here. Lighting sort of feel looks like to be great. Airbrush in, and then in color, and on it soften up, as well as from this time I'll do the opposite of our shadow, so I'll just come up and to the left, so it's a little bit more whited out, a little less saturated, and then I'll move the red, blue, green selector a little bit towards the yellow. That gives it a more natural light feel, like the sun is shining on our character. And I'm basically just going to ever so gently add a little bit of light to the neck tendon, as well as to the outside of the neck. And so from there, we can then go even further, a little bit more of a hard light here, and just kind of highlight the neck. And then I'll soften it up towards the shadow, like so, so that way we can kind of see that those areas stick out. And you can soften it and play with it as much as you want, so it's not quite a jarring color. Then I'm going to add a multiply layer, and then I'll select my little shadow here. And the multiply layer is nice because then even if I come through here, you can still see sections right here and here that are slightly brighter than if I was just up in here working. And that's because the multiply layer basically just darkens and adds a little bit more saturation to everything. So it's really good for just like cast shadows. Now, kind of sticking with the theme of our previous light-skinned rendering tutorial, I'll keep this character's shadows relatively small. Not gonna go crazy with them, and that way, you know, kind of match what we did before. So it won't be anything too intense. It'll be really good for just getting your foot in the water here. From there, I like to just start with the multiply layer on the ear. Of course, you can do whatever works and feels best for you, but for me, I like just adding in a little bit of hard shadow there. Nothing crazy, just kind of following the outline of our ear. The shadows, so this little part here of the ear that I just circled, that kind of sticks out further than the rest of it, so I like to make sure that this shadow down here is a little bit larger than right here, because this is a little bit closer to the light. We'll do that same thing over here, like so. Then we'll soften those shadows a little bit. From there, we'll just kind of work our way back. So again, whenever I use shadows, it's just a little bit down and to the right on my little dropper here, and a little bit towards the red. And you don't want to be too harsh with either of those. If you go too far, then it's kind of jarring and looks off. But if you do it just a little bit, it adds just a little bit of a deeper coloring to the character and makes it feel a little bit more alive. Well, kind of playing in with natural light. So like if you were in the moonlight, you wouldn't want to be using light that looks, you know, super warm. You'd want to be going more towards blue and things like that. But for this tutorial here, we're just in natural sort of sunlight, so we can use warmer colors for our shadows and for our lighting, and it'll look normal. So from there is the face. Now in my sort of art journey, I found that the less sort of details and shadows I put into the face, it tends to look a little bit nicer. Like it ends up looking a little bit softer, a little bit more pleasant to look at. So we don't really want to overwork this. We want it to match the rest of the body, of course, but I'm going to keep things pretty simple here. So just like before, I'm starting with a little bit of shadow like that. Then I'm going to grab the actual skin color itself with a slightly smaller brush and just capture the corners of my ears that are slightly visible. Then make sure the portion that is not covered by hair is nice and soft looking. And again, it does help to just kind of flick on and off the visibility of your shadow layers, because since we're working so softly, sometimes it can blend in enough that you can't just easily catch exactly what you're doing. So be flicking things on and off, kind of rebalance as you go. From there, we'll add another layer. We'll make a slightly bright spot here, and I'll just barely add that into the main portions of our face. And then I'll use a smaller one here for the cheeks, where the cheeks are going to have a little bit more height to them, so those will be a little bit brighter. I'll sort of tone it down near the bangs there. And then from there, instead of going straight to like a harder lighting or anything like that, I'm just going to go to my multiply layer, and then I'll work my way back from there. So again, I'll grab our shadow that's from our neck, and keeping this relatively simple here, just gonna follow my hair strands with my hard multiplied shadow here, like so. Right here, I've got some color here that I gotta fill in a little bit better. With really clean line art, you won't have to fill in as much of like missed little blocks and stuff, but for me, since I was just kind of letting the line art rip, I just have some sections here that are not colored, but it is what it is. So we'll just do this, and now it's fixed. So from there, what I like to do is add a little bit. We also have a bang right here, so we're gonna add that. But I'll add a little bit of shadow underneath the little eye socket portion here, like so. Then a little bit of shadow under my nose. And you can kind of use whatever shape you want for that. And then the ear. I don't want to go crazy with the shadow on this character here. catch under this fold. From there, I'll kind of erase, just so that way everything's softened up just a bit. You know, you can leave it dark up in this area, up in here, but you want to make sure everything that's kind of out in the light is a little bit softened up so it's not quite so jarring. From there, I am going to come down here and actually soften the neck shadow right here. It's just different enough that it's a little bit jarring. And then, same with my light. So this is my light layer right here. You maybe can see it flicking on and off like this. I'm just going to lower the opacity of it for now to 80. Because again, just the same way with when you're honestly doing like construction lines and your line art, you're always just making little adjustments as you go. Because we want the finished product to look nice. It's okay if at certain points during working on it, it looks a little bit derpy and wonky. That's perfectly fine. It's going to happen. It's just as you go, you want to be able to catch those things and kind of mess with the balance of your lighting and shadow until you get the overall clarity and style that you want. So now I'm going to work down from my multiply layer. So I'm going to put a layer in between my multiply and my light layer. And for this one, I'm going to put in a little bit of blush. So I have kind of a more textured homemade brush that I like for blush, but for the sake of keeping things simple and easy for you guys to do, instead of walking you through how to set up that brush, we're just going to use the airbrush and it'll get the job done. So again, I'm keeping that same method of not overworking it, and we can soften this if we need. But I just want to add some blush on the cheeks beneath the eye, and you can kind of figure out and try to rebalance it as best you can, just so that way it's symmetrical here. And then I'll soften the edges of it, because I want the blush to be the deepest, kind of right in the center, but then everything else on the sides you kind of want to just blend and fade away. And again, I'm keeping the blush pretty light, and then I just take the same exact blush color, I'm not going to mess with it. I come to my hard shadow airbrush here. I get real small, I'm just at a level 10 size here. And I'm just going to add these little scratches. This is just something that's super common in anime and manga to help show blush. You add those in, and you can make those as dark or bright as you want, whatever looks best to you. I just think that the less crowded the face looks, it tends to look a little bit better in the finished product. So we'll do that. And then from here, we'll grab on the face, this kind of brightest portion, and we'll come way up towards the brightest section of our color wheel here. And we can add a little bit of cheek shine and a little bit on our nose. And then we'll just want to lower the brightness on those a little bit. From there, we could actually do that same thing here on our neck, just to add some parts where the light is the harshest, make them real faint, but it kind of adds a little pop. So in fact, I'll even lower the opacity on that a little bit. There. So from there, if you wanted to, you could come back to the shadow layer here, make it a little bit darker as we go up the head, like this underneath the hair. And then another thing you could do, if you really wanted to add a little bit more pop to your character, you could actually add a little shadow behind the eyes. And then on your light layer, which is right here, you can take a little bit of brightness, use your lighting brush, and get just the little portion right here. And that'll kind of help the eyelid pop a little bit more, as well as show that there's like an actual socket, behind it. So it'll add a little bit more depth to it. So for right now, we'll stick with this face, and again, we'll kind of mess with it if need be later. We will probably add some just basic lip gloss, but I like to just do that at the end. So next we'll come to our hair. I'll work on this bottom portion of the hair in a bit, just because some of the techniques I'm going to use will make more sense if we just start at the top. So this is a super simple way to do the hair, and if you practice it and get it down, I think it looks nice enough. So this will keep it simple. It's a great place to start. It can be built upon rather easily. But what I like to do is I start from my little hard shadow brush, and I keep it, you don't want it to be so small that you're just scratching in things, but you don't want it to be so large that it's taking up too much space. And from here, I'm just going to kind of start at the bang portion and just gently scratch in some darker sections for our hair. And I'm trying to not just keep it all one even shape. And as I go, especially for the hair, when I do some other face tutorials, I'll use some slightly different techniques and methods, just so that way it's a little bit different each time, rather than just the same thing. And then from there, if you want to make it a little bit different, we'll grab the actual hair color on the same layer and just sort of tighten some of these up and break them up. Because we want kind of interesting shapes to look at. We don't want them all to just be the same. So we'll just kind of break up some of these. Again, for me, I really like just then using like a smudge brush and just kind of blending those, but I don't recall if clip comes with its own, so I'm just going to soften them. So just try to make this as easy as I can with just stock brushes so that you guys can do it as well. So we just want to soften the tops of it so it blends into the hair a little bit. From there, we'll make a new layer. And I guess we could actually just grab here on our previous layer, and we can actually do that same thing, but up here near the root of kind of where everything's connected. And then I'll just grab the same color as my hair, kind of break that up, soften it. It doesn't need to be softened that much, but anyway, so now we're on our new layer. We'll grab our hair color. This time we'll come up and make a brighter color, so a little bit more towards the yellow, a little bit more towards the white, less saturated colors here. And we basically want to mimic what we just did, but now with a bright color. And this will kind of act as the portions of the hair that's being struck by light. So it'll add kind of a shine. And then we'll grab our regular hair color just to break some of this up. I'll even make it a little bit smaller so I can get a little bit more detailed, interesting shapes to look at. This, then I'll soften the top and bottom of our hair like so. And then what I like to do next is I grab my dark portion of the hair here, I make a color that is ever so slightly darker, and then just like with the blush, I just use a very small hard shadow and just sketch in some areas here where hair strands can kind of be seen, just to kind of add some more shapes for the eye to follow. Or at the very least, it's what I like to do. If you don't like that detail in it, then you can leave it out and it'll be fine. And then through the shiny part of the hair, I'm just going to erase, just so that way it softens it a little bit. From there, we are going to grab our regular hair color and make a multiply layer. And then coming over to our G pen, we'll just add some little tiny sections here that might be shaded. Still keeping in the same sort of methodology for the face, where we're not trying to overshadow here, especially because this character is kind of supposed to be out in the sun here, so there's not going to be crazy shadows going on. But just try to use your imagination and pick out places on your piece where the sun might be getting blocked out. So like behind the ears and stuff like that. There we go. And then I'll put a little shadow right there. And then we'll just soften some of these up. Like so. And then from there, if you want to make your bright spots here look extra glossy, you can use a hard shadow, again with light. Okay, well I picked the worst color possible apparently, but you can add some extra shine like that, you know, and you can kind of work with it till it's what you like. For this one, I'll leave that out just because it'll keep it even more simple, but in the other ones, we'll kind of look at the hair a little bit more in depth and kind of just show some different details you can use for it. But for right now, we will call that good. So now we will go back down to our bottom portion of the hair, and essentially I like to just basically do the exact same thing we just did, but instead of worrying about a light layer for this, we're just gonna snag it with kind of some dark streaks here at the base. Like so, you can kind of soften. And then I'll immediately go into adding our little hair strands that's visible in it. Again, you don't have to do that portion if you don't like the look of it. That's perfectly fine. So we'll do that. Then we will do a multiply layer and add some shadow here. Like this. Still trying to keep the shadowing, the shading pretty soft here. I don't want to overdo it. Oops. Before I really soften anything, I make sure that any shadow that's in the area is complete, because then if you are trying to soften just one part of it and you come back to hit that other part, it can soften the rest and maybe make it too soft. So we'll do that. And from there, now I just have the eyes. So a really simple way that I do the eyes, so I recommend not making your eyes just pure white. I'm at 95. That way, at the end, if we want to add some like actual really bright light spots to the eyes, it'll still actually be visible. If you just use a complete white for the our white portion of the eye, then it's just going to kind of be visible across the colored portion itself and not actually look like the whole eye is reflecting light of any kind. So you could even go darker with the eye, that's perfectly fine too. For this one, I'm trying to keep the eyes rather cheerful looking, so I'm just going to keep it at 95. And in terms of work on the eyelid, or on the white portion here, I'm just going to make a multiply layer. I'm going to come down probably about 75 all the way over at the white. And then I'll just add a tiny bit of shadow for basically where the eyelid is covering. And then I'll soften it a little bit. So, I guess actually real quick, I will some shading to my eyebrows here. Gotta slightly tidy that one up. There we go. Alright, so now for the eyes, there's so many different ways you can make and render eyes. You can give them pupils, you can opt not to, just kind of depends on the style you're looking for. Again, I'm just going to keep this using brushes that anyone can use, so I'll show you a super simple way to do it. So for starters, we're just going to use our light airbrush. So we picked a kind of middle of the road neutral green color here. So we'll come down almost halfway down all the way to the black section here, and we'll make it a rather dark color. And so we want to use a large brush, and we basically just want to make it so it has like its own gradient, getting darker and darker as it gets closer to the top of the eye, up by the eyelid. So then we'll add another layer with an even darker shade, and we'll continue that gradient here from about the middle section of our eye, like so. So you can make your eyes pop as much as you want. For this, just to keep things pretty simple, we'll actually go all the way as bright hued green as we can, and we'll just add that little section here at the base, just so our eyes really pop. And then you can use your little eraser brush to make it not quite so jarring. And if you don't want your eyes to pop quite at this magnitude, that's perfectly fine. A lot of anime sort of eyes are sort of really, really bright like this, so just for the sake of keeping this pretty simple, we'll do that. Now, this is kind of the fun part where you can get creative here and add a lot of pop. So what I've done is I have my little green color here. I come all the way up to the top, so it's really bright at just to the right of the halfway point of my square here. I'm going to grab this color, and then I'll come down here to kind of a turquoise color, and with my hard shadow brush, you can then add in little color spots of really bright portions where the eye is catching a lot of light. And you can kind of mess with this. I'll show different methods and techniques of this in our other tutorials as well. So if this is not the way that you really like your eyes to look, that's fine. I'll have some other tutorials up as well, but you can certainly just do as you please. But after that, what I like to do is then come up here and pick a more blue color, and then within these dots, we'll add just some of those. And we're going to soften up and change some stuff as we go. And after that, I will finally end with some yellow. Then we'll soften these up a little bit. For the green one though, the sort of main backing color, I'm actually going to soften it as it goes up, like so. From there, I like to add in a multiply layer. So I grab about halfway down on my little color spectrum here. Oops. You have to actually make it a multiply layer. There we go. And then just following the shade from our eyelid, I'll do that, as well as soften it a bit. And then from here, if you want your color to pop even more, because I do realize that when you're super zoomed up, the detail, it doesn't look quite right, but when you have just a regular portrait posted up, then it adds a lot of color in your eyes to add some of the different sort of complementary colors in the eye itself. And so you can get creative with it and mess with it till it's something you like, or you can just disregard all of the extra colors and, you know, just go for like a green and yellow, or just go for let's see, or just go for, you know, the green color. I mean, it'll look fine either way. You can kind of mess with it like you want, but from there, if you want to add further pops of color. Then add a layer beneath your multiply layer and make it a color dodge layer. And then I just grab all the way at the top right, and since these are green eyes, I'll grab a super soft brush all the way on the green, and on one side I will add a sort of a green color dodge like that. And on the other, I will add sort of a purplish color. I'll erase that at the top and then lower the opacity. And so if you want your eyes to pop even more, then you can add just that, and you can kind of mess with it till it's something you like. I'll make it rather soft though, like that. So we are almost done. The last thing I want to do is just add some lip gloss. So I'm going to grab our little skin color here. I'm going to come down to the pink. I don't want to go super, super dark and bold, because I just kind of want this to end up looking more like a gloss. And then from the corner of my mouth, I'm just going to basically add in a little smile shape, just to connect it. And then I'll do the same kind of up in here. So if you really wanted to make it the shape of lips and stuff, then you can mess with it. If you want them to have full-on lipstick, then you could connect all of this if you want. Just for this character, their overall flow and feel, I'm keeping this really slight. I don't want it to be super detailed and bold or anything, but just to add a little bit of color here. So what I like to do is we'll add a little bit of a pink color here. Then we'll come up here to our hard shadow brush, make it a darker color here. Oh, we'll come up here to the soft shadow, do this, just sort of darken right where the lip curve actually is. Then we'll make a new layer and hide that layer so we can easily pick our pink color. Then I add a pretty drastically brighter, sort of glossy version of our lip color here. So that way anything that's kind of in the light will kind of have a brighter hue, like so. From there, we'll come up to our hard shadow and pick super glossy, bright pop of color. You could even do this as a add layer if you want to make it really pop. For this, I think it's gonna be a little bit unnecessary. Put those in, and then we're going. And you can add as much gloss or shine as you want. You don't have to add as much spots as I did. And then we'll really soften it near the corners there, like so. And then what I like to do is add a multiply layer just right under the lip here, and then try to keep it somewhat even, like so. Soften just a bit. Maybe less than that. Oh, there we go. Okay, and then I just come to the whole layer itself. So our entire lip gloss is right here. If you wanted them to have super, super bright lipstick, then you could kind of keep it almost where it's at and maybe just lower the opacity. But for me, since we're kind of doing a gloss and we kind of want it to, fade out here. So near the corner of the mouth, I'm just going to use my eraser soft brush. So I soften the corners like that. To me, that already looks a lot better than what it was. So it's not just a super bold, all of a sudden pop of color. So you could even leave it like that and call it good. I'll actually lower, because this is just supposed to be a slight gloss, I'll lower the opacity so it makes it just slightly pink like that. So, but basically that's just a super simple way that you can render out your anime characters. It's nothing super ultra fancy. It's pretty quick to do, all things considered. It takes me longer when I'm trying to explain what I'm doing and go through details like that, but it's to me it seems like a really good base and building block that you can use, because yeah, you can use like color layers. Like if you wanted to add a little bit more pop to the hair, you know, beneath our multiply layer, you could grab a color dodge and you can kind of come up to a darker shade of red almost, and you can grab some light and you can add some pops and really, you know, mess with the saturation and stuff. So you could add just a little bit of like color and stuff, especially to like your light layer. So you could do all sorts of stuff and work with it and mess around with the shadows and overall lighting and balance of the character. But I think that if you're a beginner artist and you're looking for a effective way to render in a sort of anime style, then I think this is a pretty good starting point. And then as you develop and advance, you can add a lot more technical techniques and do some more advanced things. But for right now, this just sticks with our simple skin rendering tutorial that we did before. So the plan is to do some more face tutorials. So we'll look at, you know, a couple different, not just cube faces. So there'll be different features as well, just not only the jaw length, but also like the eyes and things like that. So either way, hopefully you found this helpful and got something out of it, and I will see you in the next one.